Most people lose the day before it even begins, not because they lack time, but because they've surrendered their mornings without realizing it. The first hour after you wake up silently programs how you think, how you react, and how much of yourself you actually bring into the day. You reach for your phone, scroll through noise, and start chasing instead of choosing. It feels small, but over time it drains your focus, weakens your emotional boundaries, and disconnects you from your deeper purpose. If you've ever felt like your energy fades too fast, your mind feels scattered before 9 a.m., or your days are shaped by other people's urgency, you're not alone. And it's not your fault. You were simply never shown how to own your morning like the Stoics did, with clarity, calm, and quiet strength. In this video, we'll walk through a step-by-step Stoic morning routine designed to help you feel energized, focused, and fully in control of your life again. Not with hype, but with simple, powerful habits that reshape how you begin each day. If you're ready to stop drifting and start leading, subscribe, stay with me, and share your story below. The version of you you've been waiting to become? He starts here, at sunrise. 1. Your morning decisions shape your self-respect. Every day begins with a question, even if it's never spoken aloud. Will I show up for myself today? And the answer doesn't come in grand declarations or distant goals. It begins in silence, before the world enters, in the smallest choices you make the moment you open your eyes. The way you greet your morning, whether with discipline or delay, sends a signal not just to your schedule, but to your sense of identity. Before you've spoken a word or left your bedroom, you've already told yourself something. I'm either someone who honors his word, or someone who breaks it in silence. That's why this matters more than people realize. Because your morning doesn't just set your routine, it defines your self-respect. Each time you snooze the alarm, skip the water, or reach for a distraction before reflection, you're not just losing time, you're weakening a quiet contract with yourself. And when that contract erodes, so does confidence. Not in a dramatic collapse, but in slow, invisible ways. Doubting your own follow-through, tolerating excuses, and carrying a subtle shame you can't quite name. But the opposite is also true. When you begin your day with intentional action, even something as small as making your bed or rising when you said you would, you restore trust in yourself. And trust, once rebuilt, is a foundation no chaos can shake. This isn't about creating a flawless morning routine or measuring your worth by how early you wake. It's about the internal message behind the motion. Stoic philosophy teaches that the only true power we have is over our choices, and every morning gives us a clean slate to exercise that power. You don't need perfect conditions to begin. You only need one deliberate act to reclaim momentum. That's the brilliance of mornings. They reset the playing field. No matter how yesterday went, this new beginning invites you to realign your actions with your values. And here's what most people miss. Self-respect isn't loud. It doesn't boast. It builds quietly in the dark, when no one's watching, when it would be easier to quit. It builds when you get up without negotiation, when you pause before rushing, when you choose presence instead of reaction. That's how strength is formed, not by forcing control over everything, but by mastering the space you wake into. Take, for instance, those mornings when everything feels heavy. Maybe you slept poorly. Maybe you're anxious about what the day holds. In those moments, your first move becomes even more critical. You're not trying to win the day in one swing, you're simply trying not to lose yourself before it begins. Rising, breathing, drinking water, and grounding your body, these are not chores. They are acts of reclamation. There are ways of reminding yourself, I am not at the mercy of my emotions. I choose how I begin. And when you choose well, everything changes, not always immediately, but consistently. When your day starts with integrity, that energy threads itself into your words, your posture, and your decisions. Others may not notice, but you do. You walk into the world a little straighter, speak with more steadiness, and respond with more clarity. Not because life got easier, but because you started it from a place of alignment. If you want to feel more in control, stop looking at the chaos outside and start watching the pattern of how you begin. Self-respect isn't a reward. It's a byproduct of doing the things you said you would, especially when they're inconvenient. And there's no better place to practice than in the first 5 minutes of your morning. Because if you can win that small private battle before anyone calls, texts, or asks for anything, you remind yourself that you're the kind of person who shows up. And that truth, spoken in silence, is the most powerful way to begin again. 2. If you don't claim your attention, the world will roll. The moment you wake up, something or someone is already waiting to hijack your mind. Before your feet hit the floor, your attention is being hunted by notifications, breaking news, emails, social media, and the quiet pressure to perform, respond, and keep up. And unless you take it back, on purpose, and the day doesn't begin with you, it begins with someone else's agenda. That's not a neutral exchange. It's a silent loss of your most valuable resource. Your attention is your power. It decides where your energy flows, what thoughts shape your mindset, and how grounded or scattered you feel as the hours unfold. If you don't guard it in the quiet moments of morning, the world will fill that space with urgency, distraction, and noise you never chose. This is where Stoic philosophy becomes more than just words on a page. The Stoics taught that clarity begins when you learn to separate what's yours from what isn't. Your thoughts, your time, your inner world, these are within your control. But when you open your phone before you open your mind, you invite a flood of noise into the most sacred part of the day. It's not just a habit, it's a surrender. And it explains why so many people wake up exhausted before their day even begins. Because their nervous system is instantly triggered by the world's demands, their mind is pulled in a dozen directions before they've even stretched, breathed, or looked inward. Reclaiming your morning starts with reclaiming your attention. That means creating space, however small, for stillness. It means starting the day not as a consumer, but as a conscious participant. You don't have to meditate on a mountain. You only need 2 minutes of silence, a glass of water, or a few slow breaths by the window. Those are not just quiet moments. They are acts of defiance against distraction. They are reminders that you are not your inbox, your screen, or your feed. You are a human being with clarity to cultivate, not just information to absorb. When you begin your day by letting others speak before you listen to yourself, you silence your own priorities. You fall into reactive mode, moving from notification to obligation, wondering why anxiety feels like the default setting. But when you create a boundary, even a soft one, you rewire the way you show up. You don't need a digital detox. You need intention. You need 5 minutes that belong entirely to you, where the only voices allowed are the ones that guide you forward, not the ones that pull you away. And here's what happens when you commit to that shift. The rest of your day gains direction. Because when you begin with clarity, the noise later feels smaller. The stress feels more manageable. You're not perfect, but you're rooted. And that's the point. Not to control every moment, but to choose the ones that shape you most. The early ones. The quiet ones. The ones where your mind is soft clay, not hardened cement. Those are the moments to protect, to slow down, to return to your own rhythm before you match anyone else's. If you want to feel more focused, start by asking where your attention goes before your thoughts have even formed. Are you letting the world decide what matters to you, or are you stepping into the day with presence? Because attention, once scattered, is hard to gather again. But when you protect it, first thing in the morning, when you pause before reacting, when you breathe before responding, you remind yourself that you are in charge of your own energy. In a world where everything wants your attention, the greatest power you can reclaim is the ability to give it, deliberately, purposefully, and in alignment with who you are becoming. That begins before sunrise, that begins with silence, and that begins with you. 3. Your body wakes up faster than your mind. There's a strange moment each morning when your eyes open, but your thoughts aren't ready. Your body is already awake, heartbeat steady, breath moving, muscles subtly engaged, but your mind is still lagging behind, like fog rolling over a quiet field. This disconnect explains why so many people start the day in friction. It's not that their life is chaotic, it's that their body and mind are waking at 2 different speeds. And if you stay still too long, trapped in overthinking or emotional drift, that gap grows wider. pulling you deeper into confusion, fatigue, and a lack of direction that feels harder to shake with every passing minute. That's why motion matters. Not because it burns calories or looks good on a habit tracker, but because it bridges the invisible gap between your physical self and your mental clarity. The Stoics taught that we are not simply our thoughts, we are what we choose to do with them. In the early moments of each day, action anchors awareness. You don't need to run 5 miles or push your body to its limit. You only need to move with intention. Stretch. Walk barefoot across the floor. Open a window and inhale the morning. Let your lungs expand. Let your blood flow. These are not just physical responses. They are signals to your mind that it's time to arrive. Think of it this way. Your mind doesn't fully engage until your body gives it permission. And yet, modern life trains us to wake up in stillness, but immediately overconsume content, messages, and expectations. That pattern traps us in a state where we feel heavy without movement, alert without presence, and busy before we've become centered. But when you let your body move first, even gently, you flip that pattern. You restore the natural rhythm of wakefulness. First breath, then motion, then thought. It's not about productivity, it's about presence. It's about starting the day as a whole person, not a fractured one. And it's especially important on the mornings when you feel most off. Because there will be days when your mind feels like mud, clouded by worry, sluggish from poor sleep, haunted by unfinished things. On those days, thinking your way out never works. You have to move your way forward, step by step, breath by breath. The smallest physical ritual, a shoulder roll, a slow walk, a stretch at the doorway, can pull you out of mental haze and back into control. Not instantly, but steadily. Because movement invites momentum, and momentum disrupts stagnation. There's something deeply stoic about this practice. You're not waiting to feel ready. You're acting in alignment with your deeper values, regardless of your current mood. And that's what builds mental resilience. Not being perfect, but showing up for the day before your thoughts try to talk you out of it. Your body becomes a silent teacher in this moment. It leads the way when your emotions hesitate. It reminds you that action doesn't need permission for motivation. It needs intention and the will to begin. Over time, this practice rewires how you experience your mornings. Instead of bracing for the day or negotiating with your energy, you meet it. You stop asking how you feel and start moving with purpose. You stop waiting for clarity and start earning it. That single shift from mental drift to physical presence carries a ripple effect into everything else. Your discipline sharpens, your emotions regulate faster, your mind begins to sync with your purpose. And in the quiet stillness after you move, even for 2 minutes, you'll notice something powerful. Your inner voice becomes clearer. Not the loud one driven by fear, but the grounded one that speaks only when you've returned to yourself. That voice is easy to miss when you're passive. But when you rise, breathe, and move into the day with your full self, it shows up, not as a shout, but as certainty. And that's where clarity begins. Not in your thoughts alone, but in the movement that brings them home. For discipline starts with how you rise. Discipline isn't built in the gym, at the office, or during moments of high pressure. It begins long before that, in the quiet, unseen instant when your alarm rings and you decide whether to rise or retreat. That decision, as small as it seems, carries weight. Because it's not about what time you wake up, it's about whether or not you keep your word to yourself. The first few seconds of your morning reveal more about your mindset than any to-do list ever could. When you get up without hesitation, you send a clear message to your subconscious. I am someone who does what he says he will do, even when no one is watching, even when it's uncomfortable. The act of getting up, especially when you don't feel like it, is the first expression of inner strength. And that strength compounds. It echoes through every conversation you have, every challenge you face, and every decision you make throughout the day. You've already won the first battle, so the next one feels less intimidating. On the other hand, when you hit snooze or delay, even slightly, you begin your day negotiating with yourself. And once you start bargaining with your own willpower, it becomes easier to break other promises, let boundaries slide, or allow distractions to rule the hours ahead. What began as a harmless 5-minute delay becomes a quiet erosion of self-command. Over time, those delays don't just affect your schedule, they shape your identity. That's why the Stoic approach to mornings is so powerful. It isn't about perfection, it's about presence and direction. A disciplined start doesn't require heroic effort or extreme routines. It simply asks that you act before your excuses get louder than your values. The moment you rise without drama, without debate, you anchor yourself in clarity. You prove to yourself that you are in charge, not your moods, not your fatigue, not the resistance whispering just 5 more minutes. And this isn't about guilt, it's about momentum. You don't need to get everything right. You only need to get up and take one decisive step forward. That single motion reclaims your direction and gives your day structure from the ground up. Real discipline is quiet. It's not about appearing motivated to others. It's about being consistent with yourself. There's a power in starting strong, even in the smallest way. Making your bed, standing up tall, moving with purpose to the next moment. These are not chores, they are cues. They remind your nervous system that today is different, not because the world changed, but because you chose to show up fully. That shift, when practiced daily, builds resilience, not just for good mornings, but for hard ones too. Because discipline is not tested when things are easy, it's proven when comfort whispers and you still move forward. Even if you've failed at this before, even if you've snoozed 100 times, you are one morning away from reclaiming your edge. And that morning doesn't need to be dramatic. You don't have to feel like it. You just have to rise. Stand up, plant your feet, breathe. Let that action say everything. Because how you rise is how you build your backbone, and every day gives you one more chance to reinforce it. When you begin your day with discipline, you don't just get more done. You walk with more clarity, speak with more intention, and carry a quiet confidence that others feel without you saying a word. That kind of strength can't be faked, bought, or borrowed. It's earned in silence, in sweat, in choosing action over hesitation. And it always starts the same way. Not with noise, not with perfection, but with the simple choice to rise when you said you would. 5. Create before you consume. What you choose to do in the first quiet moments of your morning has the power to define the rest of your day. Most people wake up and instantly reach outward, toward their phones, their inbox, the world's noise, without realizing they've skipped the most vital step, turning inward. If the first thing you do is absorb someone else's thoughts, you delay the moment you hear your own. You silence your inner compass before it has a chance to speak. That's why it matters so deeply to create before you consume. Not because you need to produce something perfect, but because you need to reaffirm your authorship over your own mind. The first act of the day should not be scrolling through strangers. It should be a quiet return to who you are and who you're becoming. Every time you create something, no matter how small, you're reminding your mind that you are a participant in life, not just a receiver of it. You don't need to write a book or paint a masterpiece. You only need to connect with your own thoughts before the world floods you with its agenda. That could be journaling a sentence, sketching an idea, mapping out your intentions, or even saying something aloud that grounds you. What matters isn't the form. What matters is the direction, forward, not reactive. Because when you start the day by consuming, you enter someone else's rhythm. But when you create, you step into your own. This shift is more than just a productivity trick. It's a philosophical realignment. It returns ownership of your time, your focus, and your voice. Stoicism is about choosing your responses wisely. And how can you choose when your mind has already been filled before you've even asked it what it needs? When you create first, you anchor yourself. You become harder to sway, less likely to get lost in distractions, and more capable of noticing what actually matters. You bring awareness to the surface, and awareness is the gateway to control. And here's what most people overlook. Creating doesn't just change your focus, it changes your energy. You generate momentum through small, deliberate actions. 5 minutes spent in quiet reflection can sharpen your mental clarity more than 30 minutes of passive scrolling ever will. Because your thoughts are not something you find, they're something you shape. And creation is the act of shaping with intention. When you write, even if it's messy, when you sketch, even if it's silly, when you plan, even if it's brief, you're setting the tone for your day. You're not just reacting, you're initiating. That simple act of authorship builds identity, and identity builds consistency. You may not feel inspired every morning. That's fine. This is not about waiting for a spark. It's about forming a habit of reclaiming your mind before the world tries to rent space in it. Even one sentence in a notebook can reconnect you with the version of yourself that's focused, grounded, and in command. That version exists inside you, even on the days when motivation feels out of reach. You just need to give it space to speak first, before the headlines, before the noise, before the expectations. So tomorrow morning, don't start by looking out. Start by looking in. Your attention is not something to hand over casually. It's the most precious resource you own. And what you do with it in the first 5 minutes of the day becomes the blueprint for everything that follows. If you create before you consume, you're not just organizing your thoughts, you're organizing your life. You're saying without words that my direction matters more than the distraction. And when that becomes a habit, your days no longer happen to you. You begin to shape them, with stillness, with clarity, and with a quiet kind of strength that endures. 6. Make your bed, make a statement. Every morning, before the world places a single demand on you, there is one decision within reach that carries far more weight than it seems: whether or not you make your bed. It's a simple gesture, almost too simple to matter, but that's exactly where its power lies. Because it's not just about neatness or routine, it's about making a quiet, powerful statement. I take ownership of this space, and I take ownership of myself. In a world that often feels chaotic and out of your hands, making your bed is one small way of reclaiming order, not externally, but internally. It sets a tone of intention. It says, even if I can't control everything today, I can control how I begin. Stoic philosophy reminds us to seek discipline, not in spectacle, but in small, deliberate acts. And there's nothing more deliberate than starting your day by transforming disorder into order. The bed, often the first thing you see and touch after waking, becomes a mirror of your state of mind. Leave it messy and your subconscious receives a message, unfinished, untended, unconcerned. But take 30 seconds to smooth it out, tuck the corners, and align your space, and something deeper happens. You align your energy. You send yourself a signal that says, I'm not drifting today, I'm directing. That energy follows you, even when you don't realize it. It travels with you into the kitchen, into your first conversation, into your thoughts as you sit in traffic or respond to emails. A made bed is not just about tidiness, it's about establishing momentum. You begin the day with completion, with clarity, with the satisfaction that you've already done something that required no applause but revealed personal order. It grounds you before distraction can scatter you. It gives you a foothold when your mind might otherwise slip into reaction. And this act becomes even more essential when life feels especially unstable. Because in the middle of stress, uncertainty, or emotional fatigue, structure becomes a sanctuary. Making your bed is not about aesthetics, it's about identity. It says, I still believe in showing up, even when things are messy. You don't have to feel motivated. You don't even have to be in a good mood. You just have to take that step. Not because you're chasing productivity, but because you're building something deeper, a consistent standard for how you treat your time, your space, and your presence. The environment you live in reflects the internal framework you carry. A cluttered room often mirrors a scattered mind, while a space cared for with presence reminds you of who you are becoming. This is why so many people feel instantly calmer when they walk into a clean, orderly room. It signals safety, structure, and self-respect. The same effect happens on a micro level when you make your bed. You return to your body with clarity. You return to your day with purpose, and you re-establish control, not through force, but through rhythm. Even on the hardest mornings, the ones when getting up feels like a quiet war, you still have this choice. And on those days, this ritual matters most. Because even when everything else feels out of place, this act reminds you, I can still create order. I can still decide who I am through what I do. You're not waiting for life to feel perfect before you show up. You're showing up as you are, in the present moment, with what you can influence. So tomorrow, don't rush past your bed as if it's just another item on a list. Let it become a small ceremony. Smooth the sheets, straighten the pillows, and watch how your posture shifts. Not just your spine, but your mindset. You've made a choice. You've done something steady. And in doing so, you've told yourself, without a single word, today live by design, not by default. 7. You don't need the perfect morning, just a present one. There's a quiet pressure many carry without realizing it. The belief that if your morning isn't perfect, the day is already lost. You didn't wake up at 5 a.m. You skipped your meditation. You forgot to journal. You reached for your phone too fast. And with that, a voice creeps in whispering that you failed, that your discipline has cracked, that something is wrong with you. But that voice is a lie. The truth is, you don't need an ideal morning. You only need a present one. Not flawless, but felt. Not scripted, but real. Presence, not perfection, is what builds focus, energy, and a deep sense of being in control of your life. In a world obsessed with optimization, it's easy to forget that the most powerful mornings aren't the ones filled with productivity hacks and rigid routines. They're the ones where you simply show up, fully, gently, and honestly. When you stop rushing through the first hour of your day as if it's a task to conquer and instead meet it as a space to arrive, something shifts. The pressure fades. The inner noise softens. You begin to reconnect with what matters, not what looks good, not what others expect, but what grounds you. That is where real clarity lives. This doesn't mean you give up discipline. Stoicism doesn't teach surrender to comfort. It teaches presence with what is, awareness of what you control, and acceptance of what you don't. So when you open your eyes and realize your body feels heavy or your mind isn't sharp, that isn't failure. That's simply the truth. And meeting that truth without judgment is itself an act of control. Instead of performing your morning routine, you live it. Instead of checking off a list, you check in with yourself. What kind of energy do I need today? What can I let go of? What small action would help me feel rooted? Sometimes that action is breath. Sometimes it's a glass of cold water. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's a slow walk to the kitchen, letting your awareness land in your footsteps instead of your thoughts. These moments aren't filler. They're foundational, because presence isn't passive. It's not waiting for inspiration. It's an act of still strength. It's choosing to participate in the start of your day instead of escaping it. And when you do that, even imperfectly, you begin to recover the one thing that truly builds power: alignment. You don't have to meditate like a monk, write a perfect affirmation, or feel inspired. All you have to do is be where your feet are. Feel the ground, feel your breath, feel what's real. That presence, practiced consistently, leads to self-trust. And self-trust leads to resilience, not the kind that looks impressive, but the kind that holds when life gets uncertain. Because it's not routine alone that strengthens you, it's how honestly you meet yourself inside it. The ritual matters, but it only works when you're in it with your full self, not just going through the motions. So tomorrow morning, forget chasing the perfect sequence. Let go of the image of who you're supposed to be by 7 a.m. Wake up and find what's already here. You don't have to do everything. You just need to show up for something. Do it quietly, do it without pressure. Do it because presence is a promise to yourself that you are enough right now, exactly as you are. And when you honor that promise with a clear breath, a small action, a soft awareness, you're already winning a deeper kind of morning. The kind that doesn't demand perfection, but that gives you back your peace. Every morning offers you something most people overlook: a new chance to reclaim your energy, sharpen your focus, and step into the day with quiet control. You don't need a perfect routine. You don't need to follow someone else's schedule or copy a list of habits that don't feel like yours. What you need is a decision to stop drifting through your mornings and start designing them with intention. That one choice, repeated daily, changes how you move through life. Because when your day begins with clarity, the rest of it bends toward purpose. This is what Stoic philosophy offers. Not motivation, but mastery. Not noise, but presence. The ability to rise, think, act, and respond from a grounded place instead of chasing what doesn't serve you. Each small action, Rising without snoozing, moving before scrolling, creating before consuming is a vote for the man you're becoming. And that man isn't built in the spotlight. He's built in the first hour of the day. If any part of this message speaks to you, share your story below. What shift are you committing to tomorrow morning? What ritual brings you back to yourself? Your words might inspire someone else to rise with more strength, more stillness, and more self-respect, one deliberate morning at a time.